Decision Desk President, and a Go Woke or Go Broke segment. We don't have a dumbest bill in America this segment, but we do have Go Woke or Go Broke. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials, and the millennial joining me today is, of course, our assistant producer, Christopher Hopkins, who's on the other side of the camera, and of course, Adam Katora, our producer. And I just want to thank everyone for listening. We do have lots of people from both sides listening to our podcast now. Thank you very much. This podcast is called Decision Desk President, and a section also on Go Woke or Go Broke. You know what that segment's about. It's actually really interesting this time, in particular because it concerns sunny Hosten. So first up, Decision Desk President. As you know, a president is not a president-elect until that president-elect is chosen at the Electoral College, and there's a formal vote at the Electoral College, which is December the 14th. Until then, the person is, maybe you could say they are the projected winner, or they're leading, or it appears that they're going to be the president-elect, but you're not technically the president-elect until December 14th when the Electoral College votes. Doesn't matter. The Decision Desk President, which we're calling this podcast because that's what all the media outlets are doing. They're saying, well, Joe Biden is the president-elect. Well, because their decision desks are saying so, they're just out of their minds. And now, of course, instead of allowing all of these states that are close states to do recounts, some by hand, some by machine, and really have confidence in who actually has won those states, particularly with all of the allegations of fraud and now sustained allegations or substantiated allegations of people who have voted even though they are dead, and lots of them too. Despite all that, we have naturally CNN just going crazy, and they decide in their craziness to bring former CIA Director John Brennan, under the Obama administration. CNN brings him on, and they ask him, a bunch of questions. We have clips on this. It's very interesting. And of course, first they say, you have one clip that says, Brennan saying he's concerned about the release of classified information. He's concerned about the release of, Brennan of all people, is concerned that Donald Trump is going to unclassify or declassify certain information, which I'm sure would show John Brennan as being a crook. No doubt about it, that's what they've been terrified of this entire time because they are part of the deep state. But nonetheless, they're also concerned that since President Trump is so unstable, as they put it, he might do something rash, like declassify information, or maybe start a war, or who knows what. This is classic CNN, and if you ever want to wonder why the 71 million people who voted for Donald Trump are so skeptical of this election, it's because of networks like CNN who won't let the process play out and let December 14th come, at which point there will be a president-elect. But no, they don't want between now and December 14th to occur. They just want to rush to December 14th and claim that Joe Biden is the president-elect and not allow any kind of vote counting to take place or some sort of, confirmation that there wasn't massive fraud going on or fraud going on in Philadelphia or Detroit or Madison or Fulton County, Georgia, just to name a few. Nonetheless, we have a clip with good old John Brennan, and here it is.
70 days, you can do a lot of damage in 70 days. He still is the president of the United States. And is he going to carry out these vendettas against other individuals, as you pointed out, Chris Wray or Gina Haspel or others? It is clear that Donald Trump is trying to exercise the power because he can, and he is going to settle scores. But I'm very concerned what he might do in his remaining 70 days in office. Is he going to take some type of military action? Is he going to release some type of information that could, in fact, threaten our national security interests? So I think people need to be looking very carefully at what he's doing.
So this coming from the CIA director under Barack Obama, who loved the idea of giving Iran billions of dollars in cash on pallets, billions of dollars to the number one state-sponsored terrorist country on the planet. And he, John Brennan, is concerned that Donald Trump is going to do something rash during his last 70 days, which they have proclaimed at CNN, it is Donald Trump's last 70 days, even though we don't yet have a president-elect. But nonetheless, that's what they're concerned about. John Brennan is concerned, and of course CNN is putting all this out there, that somehow Donald Trump is going to be so dangerous during the next 70 days that he must be removed. Don't take my word for it. Here's John Brennan actually suggesting that to Chris Cuomo at CNN. We have that clip, and here it is.
All right, so this is the key question. What can be done? Short of him messing with the Electoral College and trying to have Republican or friendlies pick their own electors and, go grand scale with faithless electors, what can be done to stop anything he wants to do in the next 70 days?
Well, if Vice President Pence and the cabinet had an ounce of fortitude and spine and patriotism, I think they would seriously consider invoking the 25th Amendment and pushing Donald Trump out, because he is just very unpredictable now. He's like a cornered tiger, and he is going to lash out. And the fact that, again, that he has the powers of the presidency in his hands is quite worrisome. Now, we know that the Attorney General Barr has done Donald Trump's bidding in the past. Will he continue to do that vis-a-vis this election? I don't know.
So there you go. So John Brennan's solution is no different than the solution of the entire Democrat Party since the day Donald Trump was the president-elect, namely to invoke the 25th Amendment or to impeach him or to say that he was part of Russian collusion, which is why he got elected the first time in 2016. Now we've had an election in 2020, and we have these same tools, that's what they are, just Democrat operative tools, saying, no, we need to remove Donald Trump before January 20th, when we don't even know, of course, who has actually won the election because it hasn't been certified and the electors haven't voted. Even though none of that has happened, we must remove Donald Trump. We must invoke the 25th Amendment. And if you have any kind of skepticism about CNN or just skepticism about politicians, which, by the way, is a good thing, then you would look at John Brennan and say, why is it for the past 4 years that John Brennan, the former CIA director, the quintessential deep state actor, has worked so hard to undermine this president since the day he was elected? And now, at 2020, where we just had an election, why is it John Brennan now can't wait for another 70 days? We must remove the President of the United States based on using the 25th Amendment to do so. Why is that? If you had any skepticism, any concern whatsoever, any critical thinking skills, and you applied it to CNN and how they have comported themselves during the past 4 years and how John Brennan in particular has comported himself, you would have to say to yourself, something isn't quite right. Something isn't quite right. There must be something with this guy, John Brennan. There must be something that he's hiding in the deep state during his period of time when he was an operative at the CIA and elsewhere for Barack Obama. It's always what I've thought. I can tell you something. It's what the 71 million voters who voted for Donald Trump, they think the same thing. They don't know what it is. They just know that it's something. It's something that just doesn't smell right. When you feel like you have to remove a president and use any lie possible to do so, even though you're undermining the will of the American people. So, next up, podcast listeners, we have the media throws softball questions to Joe Biden. That's right. The media throws softball questions to Joe Biden during his press conference. If you want to call it that. So Joe Biden has a press conference, and it's so obvious that the media, if you want to call them that, have been given the questions that the Joe Biden campaign wants to be asked to Joe Biden. And so behind Joe Biden, and that's why we're calling this also the Decision Desk President podcast, is because behind Joe Biden, behind him, and if you're watching, you can see this. If you're not watching and you're listening to the podcast, I'm going to describe to you, there's a graphic behind Joe Biden during his actual press conference, and it says, Office of the President-elect. Office of the President-elect. In other words, it's been decided that he is the president-elect, that the Electoral College has met, they voted, and this is the president-elect, namely that he will be sworn in January 20th at noon next year. That's the suggestion of the graphic, that it's the office of the president-elect, somewhere in Wilmington, Delaware, I guess. So we have a number of clips on the media being complete tools and throwing these softball questions to Joe Biden. And you have to think to yourself, gee, if it were Donald Trump, what kind of questions would they have asked? What kind of questions did these same media outlets ask Donald Trump during the 4 years that he was in office? Did it ever look anything like this? Anything? Well, if you want to ever see some softball questions, you want to see what it's going to look like for the next 4 years in the event that Joe Biden is chosen and fully elected and the electors vote for him on December 14th. If you ever want to see what the next 4 years are going to look like, well, this is it. We have the first question of the softball questions, and here it is.
I also wonder, you warned during the campaign that as the walls closed in on the president, he would behave more erratically. Yesterday, he fired his defense secretary on Twitter. Are you worried that he's disabling the government? And what are you saying to the world leaders who are calling you at this point about the situation here?
So, pretty straightforward, right? If you were a real member of the media and you were truly a journalist, you would say, Mr. Vice President, can you tell me what you think about what the president has said about the fraud that has occurred primarily in Philadelphia, but in other American cities where there have been now a substantiated claims, and they have been substantiated, of dead people voting. Why? Because we have the fact that they voted, and we also have the death certificate that shows that they're dead. So clearly, that's fraud. That would be not a bad question to ask. But no, the media lobbing those softball questions, and as I said, the Biden team, ladies and gentlemen, they are completely and utterly providing these questions to the press because we don't have a press anymore. We don't. It's just an arm of the Democrat Party. Everybody knows it. Certainly not the people that voted for Joe Biden, but maybe some of them do, and they accept that that's the way it should be, which makes it even worse because you need an independent, critically thinking press in order for a democracy to be able to survive and to thrive. So we have the second softball question. This one's really good, and here it is.
Mr. President-elect, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has suggested today that he may not recognize the outcome of this election until the Electoral College meets next month. Have you spoken to your longtime friend in the Senate, Mr. McConnell, and what do you make of his specific comments over the last 24 hours?
I haven't had a chance to speak to Mitch. My expectation is that I will do that in not too distant future.
Can you believe that question? This is actually a member of the media asking Vice President Biden that Mitch McConnell says that we have to wait, for the Electoral College to meet to know who has actually won. And this guy, the member of the media, doesn't even seem to know that that is a requirement. He doesn't even seem to know or understand what the Constitution. Here's the thing. Why wouldn't you, as a member of the media, whenever you have an opportunity to do so, provide some background to the American people when you ask a question and say, Mr. Vice President, the electors don't actually meet and vote until December the 14th. Don't you think it's a little odd that you have office of the president-elect behind you when the outcome of the election is still uncertain? There's a question. But no, instead, this tool from the media is like, well, Mitch McConnell and you are really good friends. That's a bunch of nonsense. They're not good friends. There's no way. Do they work together in politics because they have to? Because that's the way it works? Yes. Good friends? I don't think so. So we have the final clip in this segment where the media throws softball questions to Joe Biden. And here's another good one. Here it is.
Sir, what do you say to the Americans that are anxious over the fact that President Trump has yet to concede and what that might mean for the country?
Well, I just think it's an embarrassment, quite frankly. The only thing that how can I say this tactfully? I think it will not help the president's legacy. I think that I know from my discussions with foreign leaders thus far that they are hopeful that the United States democratic institutions are viewed once again as being strong and enduring.
And they can only be strong if you actually follow the Constitution of the United States, which spells out exactly when you are the president-elect. And Vice President Biden is not the president-elect. Not yet. But once again, the media is literally fed these questions from the Biden campaign. And the media is trying to undermine not only the Constitution of the United States, but the actual voting process in the United States. And they're just saying, nah, don't pay any attention to the questions that are being raised. Don't pay any attention to the fact that 91% of people in Philadelphia voted, which I find absolutely impossible, by the way. Impossible. Just didn't happen. Don't pay attention to any of that. In fact, we, the media, we're not going to pay attention to it either. We just want you to criticize the President of the United States because he hasn't yet conceded. Well, that's not what Joe Biden said in the first debate with Chris Wallace. Because in the first debate with Chris Wallace, Biden was asked that very question. And listen to Biden's response. We have that clip. And here it is.
Vice President
you think
Biden,
that's good?
Vice President Biden, final question for you. Will you urge your supporters to stay calm while the vote is counted? And will you pledge not to declare victory until the election is independently certified?
Yes, and here's the deal. We count the ballots, as you pointed out. Some of these ballots in some states can't even be opened until Election Day. And if there's thousands of ballots, it's going to take time to do it. And by the way...
So the vote hasn't been certified today. It's not certified. But yet the Vice President of the United States is saying that he is now part of the office of the president-elect. But the vote hasn't been certified. And that same Vice President said in the first debate with Chris Wallace that you got to wait for the vote to be certified. Also, it's going to take a long time, says Biden in the first debate, after Chris Wallace asked the question. It's going to take a long time to count all those absentee ballots, which indicates that this man, who has clearly lost some cognitive ability, knew back then in the first debate that all of those absentee ballots would take plenty of time to count until such time as they got the desired result, which is what is happening in this particular election. And it's also why 71 million people really are questioning the results of the election and whether or not it was a free and fair election and that all legal votes were counted. But nonetheless, Biden has proven that he's a complete tool as well, because he said initially, that, as you heard in the clip, he said initially, no, the vote must be certified. And now, of course, Biden in his softball media press conference, the softball media press conference, you heard just a few of those questions that we just played for you in those clips where they're not even trying to address that issue. They're not even interested in what the vice president said in the first debate, which, by the way, is also enumerated in the Constitution of the United States. They don't care. They don't care because they are part and parcel of the Democrat Party without question. So next up, we have Tucker takes a swipe at Fox News. Tucker Carlson takes a swipe at Fox News. And that's up now. Why? Why did Tucker take a swipe at Fox News? Well, because Fox News is in a free fall with respect to their viewership, because the American people are very upset with Fox News' coverage of the presidential election. And they should be. They should also be upset with Chris Wallace's coverage of the first debate. I mean, that's when it all started. But since then, it has just gone downhill because, of course, election night, we had everything from Arizona being called early to Florida being called late, which is just hard to believe. And then fast forward, we only just had North Carolina and Alaska called. How's that possible? How's that possible? And I can only say that it's possible potentially because there were so many mail-in ballots and there was so much fraud with those mail-in ballots that there was a thought that perhaps Alaska and perhaps that North Carolina would be flipped as well. And I'm not, quite frankly, convinced that Georgia has flipped, just like I'm not convinced that the Rust Belt has flipped, and I'm not convinced that Arizona has flipped. Why am I not convinced? Because I really think that the ballots have to be counted by hand, and there has to be a recount. If not by hand, then a recount. I think that the machines at these states that were made by Dominion have to be checked and double-checked. So nonetheless, Tucker Carlson takes a swipe at Fox News. And why did he do so? Because Neil Cavuto cut off Kayleigh McEnany's press conference. So Kayleigh McEnany, the President of the United States' press secretary, had a press conference about the status of the election and what the President of the United States was doing and his team were doing with respect to the claims of illegal voting. And Neil Cavuto cuts away from Kayleigh McEnany. Why does he cut away from her? Because he proceeds to say, Neil Cavuto proceeds to say that Kayleigh McEnany, you can't believe this. He basically says that, we can't play this because this whole idea, the fact that there was voting fraud or illegal votes, we just can't cover that here at Fox News. It's just not something that we can do. We shouldn't be doing that. It's not right. It's just not right. And as a result of that, we're not going to let you hear it. I don't want to hear it because I'm Neil Cavuto. I don't want you to hear it either, listeners, because, I don't think it's true. Well, once again, is that the purpose of a news program? Is a news program supposed to completely look the other way? Are they supposed to look the other way and not even ask critical questions? Or at least let the press conference happen and let the American people hear it? And I really think this is a weird time, not just for the fake news media, but now for Fox News. So what did Tucker Carlson do? Tucker Carlson took a thinly veiled swipe at Neil Cavuto's coverage. He didn't call out Neil Cavuto by name because I think Fox News probably would have fired him. By fired him, I mean they probably would have fired Tucker Carlson. And they probably would have done so because Fox News is already in a free fall, their ratings are. But it seems to me, and you tell me if I'm wrong, seems to me like the only person that's on Fox News now that's really willing to call out their own news desk, their own decision desk, is Tucker Carlson. I think he's the only one. He's the only one. We have a clip with Tucker Carlson providing the thinly veiled swipe at Neil Cavuto, and here it is.
In a democracy, you cannot ignore honest questions from citizens. You're not allowed. You can't dismiss them out of hand as crazy or immoral for asking. You can't just cut away from coverage you don't like. You can't simply tell people to accept an outcome because force doesn't work in a democracy. That's dictatorship.
Yeah, that's dictatorship. Force is dictatorship, and we have a process for choosing the President of the United States. We have a process for certifying their vote, and then we have a process in the Electoral College. And obviously, even before the Electoral College, we have a process where state legislatures choose the electors. So there is a process, but for some reason, the media, including Neil Cavuto, want to skip everything in between and go right to a Joe Biden presidency. I have a question for you podcast listeners. Why is that? Why is that? Do you even know? Do you have any idea why Neil Cavuto and others at Fox News somehow, in my mind, out of the blue, have decided that they don't even want to ask any questions anymore? So you want to know how bad it is for Fox News? It's so bad that Fox News has hired a crisis management team to improve their PR. So Fox News' ratings are so down, they've just fallen through the basement. And my understanding is that MSNBC has higher ratings now, that Fox News has hired a PR firm. You don't need a PR firm, Fox News. You don't need a PR firm. Well, you know what you need? You need to just start reporting the news. It's what has happened. That's the news. Maybe ask some critical thinking questions to Joe Biden. Maybe follow the Constitution of the United States. What is going on over there? I have no idea. But as I said, the fact of the matter is that Tucker Carlson is, I think, the only member of that news division that's actually willing to challenge the entire programming at Fox News, as well as certain hosts. And that's so important to do that. I'm not saying that Sean Hannity hasn't done that, but I think Tucker Carlson is the one that has the most backbone, because I think Carlson knows, you know what, I can go anywhere. Tucker Carlson is saying this to himself. I can go anywhere, and it's important for me to have my own independent show where I question everything, including my own news division. Imagine if CNN and imagine if MSNBC had the same kind of personality there, such as Tucker Carlson. I mean, they'd be fired right away. They'd be even just for remotely and thinly veiled comments calling out Chris Cuomo for being corrupt, and of course completely biased. Excuse me. They'd be fired. They'd be fired at MSNBC. They'd be fired at CNN. And so good for you, Tucker Carlson and Fox News. As far as this PR thing that you're up to, you might want to just look internally, and you might want to take out the Constitution of the United States and realize that there isn't a decision desk president, and there isn't a president-elect yet. The election hasn't been called yet because there is someone who is ahead, yes, and that someone who is ahead is clearly Joe Biden, and there are really lots of questions in the states and lots of recounting that's going to be done, and until such time, we won't be able to decide who is the president-elect. But Fox News doesn't want to do that. So get this, podcast listeners. This is good, too. Get this. Portland commissioner, which is kind of like a councilwoman, Portland, Oregon commissioner, she calls 911 even though she wants to cancel the police. I got to say this again. So Portland Commissioner Joanne Hardesty called 911 even though Joanne Hardesty, as a Portland commissioner, an elected official, wants to cancel the police. We actually have a clip of Portland Commissioner Joanne Hardesty's 911 call. But before we play that clip for you, we just want to tell you a little bit about Portland City Commissioner Joanne Hardesty. We have a clip of her with the media talking about canceling the police and what her general feelings are about the crises that have been going on in Portland. And this is from July of this year. And we have that clip, and here it is.
We are now in the midst of our fourth crisis in the last 6 months. We started with the COVID-19 pandemic that, as you know, is worldwide. Then immediately thereafter was the economic cliff that we are continuing to go over. And third was the racial justice demands that are being heard all over the United States, as well as in 16 countries. And last but not least, being targeted by 45 for unaccountable secret police force that every night brutalizes our community.
So did you get that? An unaccountable secret police force in Portland, according to Commissioner Joanne Hardesty, that is just brutalizing the people. Yet she wants to cancel the police, and then she just called 911 yesterday because things didn't go her way, so she called the police. Listen to the story now. So Commissioner Joanne Hardesty allegedly demanded that Lyft driver Richmond Frost, it's not alleged, by the way, because we're going to play the clip for you, the 911 clip, that Richmond Frost roll the windows up, and Richmond Frost was the Lyft driver. She told her driver, roll up the windows because she was cold. Lyft's instructions for its drivers on how to deal with COVID state clearly, roll down the windows during trips, or use the car's vents to bring fresh air in from the outside. So it's probably going to be cold inside the car no matter what, because you have fresh air coming in. You don't really have the heat on. It's just fresh air coming in or the windows down. And so that is Lyft's guidance for COVID. So the driver was following Lyft's guidance. But Joanne Hardesty was so upset that she was cold, even though the driver tried to tell her why he was doing what he was doing, having the windows down, that she called 911. She called 911. And he was picking her up, the Lyft driver was picking her up at the Ilani Casino in Washington State. So she was at a casino, calls the Lyft driver. She's probably upset already because she lost a lot of money at the casino. I mean, what a genius she is. So you've already heard the first clip where she basically says the police brutalized the people of Portland. Now you're going to hear the 911 clip. So she went from cancel the police to, hello, I need help. My Lyft driver, he's not going to put the windows up. Here's that clip. Here it is.
911, what's your emergency?
Well, I got a Lyft driver that decided he would just drop me off at a filling station and he wants me to get out, and I'm not getting out of the car in the dark at a filling station. Not happening. All because I asked him to put the window up, but I'm not leaving. He says I have to get out of his car, or he's calling the police, so I decided to call for him.
Okay. I mean, technically it's his property and you have a civil agreement. There's no crimes involved.
Well, he said he was calling the cops. I told him he's not going to leave me.
It's not a crime to call the cops.
I'm sorry. This is probably one of the dumbest elected officials in America. You know, first cancel the police, but then get into a Lyft car and the windows, he won't put the windows up, even though he told me it's because of COVID and it's for my benefit. So I'm going to call the police. I'm going to call 911. And what's 911 going to do? Yeah, hello, Mr. Lyft driver. Would you please put up the windows or we're going to have to arrest you? So what the Lyft driver did is he said, look, you're giving me a hard time. I can't put up the windows. So I'm just going to cancel the ride, which the Lyft driver has a right to do. I'm going to cancel the ride because you won't follow our policy or you won't follow our terms of service. So I'm going to let you out here at the gas station and you can call another ride. And so she was so livid that he was going to do that she calls 911 and it's like, the tattletale. Oh, he won't let me be special because I'm a commissioner. I'm an elected official. That's just not fair. And this is what the real world looks like, unfortunately, in many of America's cities, where you have these idiots who are representing the people who want to cancel the police and then, of course, call 911 because, their fast food order wasn't correct, because that's happened before too. Or in this case, the Lyft driver is being mean. He's being mean. Has he done anything wrong? No, he hasn't done anything wrong. He just won't put up the windows. So we have another clip of Joanne Hardesty. If you think that's funny. So here's Joanne Hardesty. She's being interviewed by KGW8 News in Portland. And this was also in July of this year. So this will tell you, it'll give you the full picture of who she is. And I want you to listen to how she characterizes the police. First, there's a question from KGW8 News. That's the reporter. Then you will hear Joanne Hardesty. And listen to this. Here it is.
But Commissioner, just as a follow-up to my question, while you are a commissioner of fire, you're also a commissioner of the city. How do we get the streets back?
Well, first we have to get the federal goon squad out of here. And then if I were a police commissioner, I would actually not have the police responding in riot gear at a protest, because all that does is actually increase tensions. It doesn't reduce tensions.
She called the police this July the goon squad. Can you imagine? Can you imagine if you, no matter who you are, no matter how you look, called this woman and her cohorts on the commission there in Portland, if you called them the goon squad, what they would say? It's just so awful about how these elected officials comport themselves. And this is what she thinks about the police, that they're goons, and that she wants to cancel them. And then she calls 911 because the Lyft driver wouldn't put up the windows. And that is, of course, Joanne Hardesty, the commissioner, which is like a councilwoman, in Portland, Oregon. Incredible. So next up, Florida Governor it's Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, my bad, moves to allow citizens to shoot looters and rioters who are targeting businesses. Let me say that again. So Governor DeSantis of Florida is introducing legislation in the state that allows citizens to shoot the rioters and the looters who are targeting their businesses. And I'm going to read from this article because this is important. This is an important move in a state that you might see in other states. So here's what it says. Governor Ron DeSantis has drafted anti-mob legislation that would expand the state's Stand Your Ground law, a move that some worry would allow armed citizens to shoot and potentially kill anyone they suspect of looting. DeSantis' newest legislation comes in response to months of protesting that frequently lead to rioting this summer in Florida and across the U.S. Following the death of George Floyd, a black man who died after a white Minneapolis police officer knelt on his neck for nearly 9 minutes. The legislation is an attempt to prevent violent and disorderly assemblies by permitting violence against anyone involved in the interruption or impairment of a business, reportedly described in the draft as being a burglary within 500 feet of violent or disorderly assembly, according to the reporting done by the Miami Herald on Tuesday. The draft legislation also includes measures that would make protesting, which disrupts the public by blocking traffic, a third-degree felony. The law would also reportedly grant immunity to drivers who unintentionally kill or injure protesters who are blocking traffic. Additionally, the law would allow the state to withhold funds from local governments that cut police budgets. Amen to that. It also allows for vigilantes to justify their action, a former Miami-Dade County prosecutor, Denise George, said. So let me say that again. So Denise George, she's a former Miami-Dade prosecutor. She says, what it allows for is vigilantes to justify their actions. Well, just so you know, Miami-Dade former prosecutor Denise George is against Stand Your Ground laws. She also says it allows for the death to be the punishment for a property crime. Okay, and that is cruel and unusual punishment. We cannot live in a lawless society where taking a life is done so casually and recklessly. And then we have Miami Beach Mayor Dan Gelber. He's the former mayor. He says it's clear that the Trump beauty pageant is still going on with governors and senators, all who want to be the next Trump. And Governor DeSantis is clearly very good as a contestant. There you go, guys. So good for you, Governor DeSantis, because what he's basically saying is that if you're in your vehicle and you're just minding your own business and you're heading home or you're heading to the shopping center or wherever you're going, and suddenly a mob comes around your vehicle and starts to roll it over or starts to try to break a window in your vehicle, because we've all seen that in 2020, then you can run people over to be able to save your family and yourself and your vehicle. Not because you want to run people over, but because you have the right to protect your property and yourself. Same thing applies in this bill with Governor DeSantis, where Governor DeSantis is saying that if you have a business and there's a mob outside that is rioting and they're randomly breaking windows and running into places and looting and stealing the stuff, that if you are inside your business and that mob tries to break into your business and steal your stuff, that as soon as they break the door and open it to come in, you can shoot them. And you can protect your property, and you can protect yourself. I gotta tell you something, if that had been implemented in Portland and in New York City and in Chicago and elsewhere throughout this country, those protests would have stopped immediately. Or at a minimum, the rioting, to be clear, would have stopped, and the burglary and the looting would have stopped immediately. And then maybe at that point, the folks who were doing this would have started to protest peacefully, as instead of trying to use this misfortune as with George Floyd, to say the least, and it was awful what happened, and we all want to see justice take place. But instead of using that as an opportunity to loot and steal and literally to ruin people's lives who own these businesses, just ruining their lives, and not to mention the people that work at these businesses. So even if you break into Gucci, right, and you steal a bunch of stuff, and you say, oh, well, Gucci's big and they can pay for it, what about the people that work there? What about their jobs? They can't show up the next day at work because there's nothing in the store. The store is completely and utterly destroyed. Unfortunately, this is where we are now in the United States of America, and I just want to give huge kudos to Governor DeSantis for really allowing the American people, in my opinion, what they should already be allowed by the Constitution of the United States, which is not only to protect themselves, but to protect their property. Without question, you should be able to protect your property. And that should always be the case. And if you can't do that, and instead you just have to board it up every night and just pray that they're not going to break through the boards, which is pretty easy to do, and then break into the store and then completely and utterly ruin your livelihood, why would anyone ever again open a store? Just saying, why would anyone do it? So in the Wall Street Journal, Democrats lost many South Texas Latinos. This is really an interesting story. And the question by the WSJ, Wall Street Journal, is why did Democrats lose so many South Texas Latinos? Why? It's fascinating. I'm just going to read 2 paragraphs from this, and you got to contemplate what this might mean to the Democrat Party and the Republican Party in the future. So for decades, in the Rio Grande City, Texas, for decades, no Democrat presidential candidate had won Starr County with less than a 48-point margin. So in other words, for many decades, Democrats won by a 48-point margin in Starr County, Texas. Local lore is that the last Republican who came close to winning a partisan race was a sheriff candidate who was gunned down in a saloon in 1907. Yet last week, 8,224 Starr County residents voted for President Trump in a red wave that moved the South Texas County from Democrat candidate Hillary Clinton's 60-point margin in 2016 to a 5-point win for Joe Biden, the largest swing to Mr. Trump of any county in the United States. In nearby Zapata County, Texas, Ms. Clinton won by 33 points in 2016. This year, Donald Trump took it by 6 points. Why is that the case when these counties are overwhelmingly Hispanic? Well, Gilbert Himosa, chairman of the Texas Democrat Party and resident of the Rio Grande Valley, said the group was trying to figure out how that happened. What seems likely, he said, is that Democrats didn't counter Republicans' messaging on 3 important issues that are important to Latino voters: the pandemic and the shutdowns that came from the pandemic, which means the loss of jobs, the loss of oil jobs, and abortion. Very interesting that in that particular area of Texas, which overwhelmingly, I'm talking about massively vote for Democrats, has swung to the Republican Party. And the interesting takeaway from this, in my opinion, but also in WSJ's opinion, is that you have people who are white and they're blue collar, and then you have people who are Hispanic and blue collar, and they're finding some sort of solace and commonality in voting for Donald Trump. Kind of interesting. And it kind of follows the trends that are happening across the country, where if you're more educated, the suburban area, you're moving more towards the Democrats. And if you are someone who's in the working world and you're blue collar, you're moving more towards the Republicans. No surprise there, because it's been my thought for a long time that the Republican Party is the party of the working men and women of this country. I've thought that for a long, long time, without question. So get this, Facebook and Google have extended their ban on political advertising. So there's a ban on political advertising post-election. There's a ban. You can't advertise on Google and Facebook. Well, that doesn't make any sense, because isn't there an election in Georgia? Well, there is, but you can't advertise at all anywhere after the election. Yet Facebook and Google Every time you pull up Facebook and every time you do a search on Google, have you noticed what it says? Joe Biden is the winner. Joe Biden is the projected, he's the president-elect. Joe Biden is the guy. And so they're throwing their own narrative out there, and they're basically saying, well, you can't organize in any way, shape, or form, because if you do, we're going to stop you. What does that mean? Well, Facebook has had a number of people trying to organize rallies in cities across America that support Donald Trump post-election, and Facebook won't allow those to occur. Even Eventbrite is a website and a platform that allows you to create events and invite all of your friends. So there was an Eventbrite event that was going to be held in Washington, D.C. this weekend, whereby there would be 1 million people that would show up, theoretically, who were supporting Donald Trump, and they would peacefully march. Eventbrite let that event be created, and then when people became aware on the left, they communicated with Eventbrite. And what did Eventbrite do? You won't believe this. They canceled the event. Eventbrite went so far as to send people who signed up for the event, they sent them emails and said, the event is canceled. It's not happening now. I mean, unbelievable. This is big tech, folks. And big tech is just out of control. And so this is what it says about Facebook and Alphabet, which is Google's parent, about, of course, banning more ads post-election. It says they plan to continue banning political ads on their platforms for the next several weeks to prevent confusion about election results, according to people familiar with the matter and an email reviewed by the Wall Street Journal. Can you believe that? They're banning the ads because they want to prevent confusion about the results of the election. Folks, the election hasn't been certified. Not a single state that I'm aware of has certified the election in their state. The election hasn't been determined, and the winner isn't determined, as we've said many times, until the Electoral College meets and votes. Well, Facebook told advertisers in an email Wednesday it plans to continue its post-election ban on political ads for another month. Google representatives have told some advertisers it is unlikely to lift its ban in November or December, the people said. So in other words, they don't want anyone communicating with anyone else using their platforms about questioning the results of the election or about organizing or doing anything. I mean, folks, this is a big tech takeover. Aren't you concerned? I mean, this is scary stuff. You can't get worse than this. I mean, this is Big Brother. This is Chinese totalitarianism and Soviet totalitarianism taken to the nth degree. And it's here in the United States, here and now. You should be concerned. So next up, it's Go Woke or Go Broke. We have this segment, and we do this every so often. It's called the Go Woke or Go Broke segment. And basically the segment is about folks who are trying to cancel you because they don't like the fact that you support a Republican in the workplace. So it's primarily in the workplace, and Go Woke or Go Broke. So they don't like your company because your company wrote a check to Donald Trump and supported his campaign. Or they don't like your company because of the fact that you employ people who actually support Donald Trump or a Republican in their campaign. Or it's a company that finds it's necessary to move because the state has become so far left that they just feel unwelcome. So that's Go Woke or Go Broke. On this Go Woke or Go Broke, we are talking about Sunny Hosten. I think that's how you say her last name. She's from The View. Sunny Hosten wants to cancel Trump supporters. So yes, Sunny Hosten wants to cancel Trump supporters. Why do we know that? Because she said so. So ABC News, The View, co-host Sunny Hosten feels that over 68 million Americans, it's actually 71 million Americans now, who voted for President Trump are selfish because they voted for someone who says they voted for someone who is racist, misogynistic, and homophobic. I mean, come on. I mean, that's not all these people have now. It's all they have that's left. And yet, meanwhile, Donald Trump got more African Americans, men and women, to vote for him than any other Republican president. I mean, come on, give me a break. So nonetheless, we have two clips from Sunny Hosten about this. And here is the first clip.
Because for me, that means that you are selfish, right? I'm not going to say that 50% of Americans are racist and sexist and homophobic, but I will say that that tells me that they will look the other way to that kind of behavior, to the plight of their fellow Americans, if personally they feel that they are doing okay and that they will do better under that type of presidency. And that, I think, is despicable. It is un-American.
She called 71 million Americans despicable and un-American. Sunny Hosten just called 71 million Americans despicable and un-American. I mean, this is so sick. This is so dangerous. This is so divisive. And here's the person who just called Donald Trump divisive, racist, misogynistic, and homophobic, being divisive. She's trying to cancel Trump voters. Don't believe me? We have a second clip. Listen to this one.
And I think those people in his administration that not only drafted some of those policies, but were complicit in those policies shouldn't be forgotten. People like Kirstjen Nielsen, people like Stephen Miller, people like Kellyanne Conway, people like Vice President Pence, who was woefully inadequate at his role of being the head of the coronavirus task force, and people like Ben Carson and Betsy DeVos. I don't think that those people should be able to profit from their experience within the Trump administration, and I don't think that they should be forgotten. And I don't think that we should look the other way. I think we need to remember, because if you don't remember things, then past becomes prologue. And I do think that people need to be held accountable for their actions. And I don't think it is reminiscent of McCarthyism at all.
No, it's not reminiscent of McCarthyism to try to cancel all the Trump supporters and, moreover, to stop them from getting employment post-Trump presidency, which is what she's suggesting. Sunny Hosten is suggesting that if you worked for Donald Trump and if you were a big supporter of Donald Trump, that you shouldn't be able to work after this election if Donald Trump is the loser or when he leaves office. You shouldn't be able to work. You shouldn't be able to get a job. People should not be able to hire you. And that's the accountability commission, that she's suggesting, that you can't work because of who you support. But it's not McCarthyism, is it? No, it's worse than that. It's actually totalitarianism. It's exactly like the social credit scoring that is occurring in communist China, where you have a social credit score. If it's high, your social credit score, and it's high because you support the communist government, and you say so in social media, and you always say nice things about them and support them, then you get a high social credit score, which means you can really get bargains on houses and interest rates and on cars. But if you criticize the Chinese government, then you get a low social credit score, in which case you actually will get kicked out of your house. Your private property will be taken from you. You will lose your job. You can't get a job. That's exactly what Sunny Hosten is suggesting in this clip. That if you supported Donald Trump or if you worked for him, you can't work in the private sector. It's not allowed because your social credit score is too low. You're too dangerous. I mean, this is just ridiculous. And one of the people that she wants to get rid of is Betsy DeVos. By get rid of, she wants to cancel Betsy DeVos because she's a Trump enabler and she should never be able to get another job again after having served Donald Trump. And what is Betsy DeVos trying to do? She's trying to improve public education in the inner cities of the most vulnerable people in our society who have really bad educational institutions, public K-12 education in their cities. Betsy DeVos is trying to improve that by giving those children school choice. And yet she must be held accountable. She must be given a low social credit score. She must be, demonized and never be able to work again. I got to tell you something. This is the left. And wherever the left gains power and authority, they ultimately become more and more authoritarian. And they become more and more like the socialists, which is who they are. And now, I never thought I would say this, but now they're becoming more and more like communist China in their intolerance of free speech and intolerance of alternative ideas and intolerance of critical thinking skills. They must cancel you. And so that is this week's Go Woke or Go Broke. Sonny Hosten wants to cancel Trump supporters. And that's it for Mark and the Millennials. Thank you for joining Mark and the Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. Thank you to Christopher Hopkins, our assistant producer, and Adam Katora, our producer. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Parler, Rumble, and our website. See you next time.